to CBD seminar. We invited Dr. Heiss, Dr. Schoenbach, and Dr. Winkler to talk about some interesting topics, specifically a study that is about cardiovascular and social epidemiology in the context and history of UNC School of Public Health. And a special thank you to Dr. Schoenbach and Dr. Winkler for putting together some valuable information regarding the history of our department and their specialties. So I'll hand it over to Dr. Heiss.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity, and I think I know this came out of a dare from our last orientation when somebody said, "Oh, you guys did a cohort study." Tell us more about it. And it's as Rahul mentioned, it's an opportunity to look at a very interesting moment at the intersection between cardiovascular epidemiology, social epidemiology, and the history of this department. And by history, I include those of us who are here in this room did some damage to Evans County data. So let me mention, I'll try to keep this brief and leave plenty of room for conversation, discussion, and opinions at the end. I recognize thanks to Rahul, Vic, and Judy for their contributions. And another resource that we tap into quite heavily is a remarkable website put together by Henry Blackburn, a very young-looking Henry Blackburn, a very young-looking Russ Watson from the University of Minnesota. And that is a remarkable assembly of material. It's a history of cardiovascular disease epidemiology, diverse studies. It's fun to read. The anecdotes, the history. There's also a trail of the growth of epidemiology, sophistication as these studies were built. So I'm drawing quite heavily on that, and as well as materials contributed by Vic and by Judy. So we're talking about the Evans County study, and I was going to take a little step back very briefly. Where and when did it happen, actually? These were the days, Evans County study in 1960, these were the days when the statistical community was starting to look at questions such as the very rapid increase in mortality attributed to coronary heart disease following World War II. That is when suddenly CHD mortality increased quite visibly so. Mortality statistics were accumulating year after year. It was a condition that affected primarily white men. We were only looking at white men, but it was remarkable that condition was taking a very heavy toll in ways that had not been seen prior to World War II. So several studies started actually around in the mid-40s. Among them, names that I'm sure you would recognize. Dr. White, Paul W. White, who actually described the myocardial infarction syndrome and did a case control study around it, set up the first cohort of what we call disease in young adults, followed by several studies, this one, Minnesota Business and Professional Men by Hansel Keys and colleagues and collaborators looking again at white men in professional roles, and attempting to identify what may be the causes for this epidemic that seems to be within the country, and identified, had some suspicions about hypotheses, so they selected from among these professional men some that seemed to epitomize some of these conditions, some that smoked, some that were very heavy, some that were not heavy, some that had elevated blood pressure. Not the study design we would necessarily favor today, but it was an attempt to learn what was behind this condition. The Framingham study, such started shortly afterwards, and of course I need to say very little about the Framingham study. But it remarkably, after 9 years after inception, the Framingham study published this famous monograph, telling us for the first time risk factors. There are risk factors. There are factors that change the probability, the chance of one's developing coronary heart disease. And they call them risk factors. We're still calling it in the public school, familiar with the term. Then followed a series of studies that primarily drew on occupational cohorts, if you will, civil servants, some quite famous. You all know about the London Transport and Postal worker where Jerry Morris contrasted conductors to drivers and showed the role of physical activity. California longshoremen, Calf and Barger did the same thing with longshoremen and classified them according to the degree to which their job exerted them physically, and found that physical exertion seemed to be protected of coronary heart disease. Difficult study to do, occupational study, but you all know that part very well. And nonetheless, that was replicated. So people already knew about physical activity, and the studies that are listed there studied to show cholesterol, certainly smoking, cholesterol, study to emerge risk factors. Now we have physical activity. The British doctor study, as you well know, looked at smoking and cancer, not cancer. Colorectal hypertension study, I know very little about it. Then came another civil servant study. And let's go down. We still hadn't reached Evans County in the 1960s. Occupational studies, some remarkable. The Chicago utilities companies, and these went on for years, for 30 years of follow-up. And they contributed much insight in terms of risk factors. Where shall we start? Tecumseh. Tecumseh is a small community close to Ann Arbor, Michigan, and was set up as a study of a whole community close to the investigator. Some, I don't know how many miles away, something like 20 miles perhaps long. And for the first time, a whole community was being studied in order to understand the role of factors that modify one's chances of heart disease. Behavior suddenly grew, social stress was mentioned, not just the physical characteristics that previous studies have mostly focused on. Charleston Heart Study, our neighbors to the south, studied a study based on, motivated by a very high mortality attributed to coronary heart disease, men and women. And that was the case for Georgia, that was the case for neighboring states. So there was already talk about the coronary heart disease belt. As of late, we have been sort of looking at the stroke belt. It's very well that was identified coronary heart disease belt. Western collaborative studies, you know about it, the type A, type B personality traits, much from that. It was done by cardiologists, but they were primarily interested in social, psychosocial traits and attributes that modified the risk of coronary disease. And we reach Evans County, 1960. So there's a bit of history behind it. And it comes at a time when researchers were still looking for risk factors, new risk factors. They could not yet explain much of the coronary heart disease epidemic, so there was this impetus and go to populations and go to settings where striking differences were observed that could be exploited for the potential informativeness. Any comments? Quick run through several decades. Okay, Evans County. Small county, about 20 miles in diameter, radius diameter, located about 60 miles from inland from Savannah, Georgia. Much of the county covered with pine forests, harvested, and about half the population live on farms, about half live in small villages, including Claxton, the seat of the main capital seat, administrative seat of the county. Total population about 2,000 Claxton, and about 40% of the population are black. So this was the setup, and why Evans County? And by the way, whoops, I thought I put a map in the read bench. I suspect it pop up when we don't want to see it. So why Evans County and why there? The county of this size had one main medical practice. Dr. Heiss was a family practitioner, and he made his interesting observation that basically saw everybody in the area was concerned and aware of coronary heart disease as a condition that affected primarily men, white men, and he became aware that he didn't see any heart attacks, any coronary heart disease among his African American patients. So was this correct? If so, is there a reason for this difference? And is this generalizable anywhere outside of what he was thinking? So he had the idea and pursued it vigorously to do a study on site to try to answer that question. Contacted the Public Health Service and said, this is a place where we need to do another framing study. And everybody had a good laugh. They said, how do you plan to do that? You need people to help you if that's what you're supposed to do. And that's where it happened. There it is. Anyway, where is it? Right there, and this happens to be Savannah. Okay, so an unusual partnership was developed. CHD mortality was known to be quite high. Coronary heart disease observed to be infrequent among African American patients, despite well-known levels of high levels of blood pressure. And the idea was conduct a study to assess whether these impressions are valid and are they generalized. So initial proposal, as I mentioned, to the United States Public Health Service, the proposal was rejected. Dr. Gillings, interestingly enough, is something that all of us do with code access. Why did you reject it? Tell me more. And they said, well, you need people to work on your own. It's very unlikely that you can pull off something. So we started to look around, contacted several people who may have mentioned here, such as the Dean of the School of Public Health, Bernie Greenberg, who was receptive to the idea, provided some advice, and they said, this calls for an epidemiologist. Dr. Castle had just become the chair of the first chair of this department of epidemiology. We had probably something like 4 or 5 faculty members. He was still recruiting. And they all went to visit Claxton and see, is this reasonable? Is this credible? Is this something we can work with? Other participants that became quite active in the study, Alta Roller, of course, Dr. Bill Kaplan, physician by training, and self-taught epidemiologist, sociologist by training, self-taught epidemiologist. And so a list of the members of the cast, certainly the Public Health Service allowed Dr. Heiss to pursue this interest by saying, we'll give you seed funding if you can show us that you can even enumerate the study population and see what you have. There were some advisors in the background, which I found to be fascinating. These are very well-known people at the time. They're never listed with the Evans County, but they encouraged Heiss to pursue it, they advised them. Interesting mentoring. Just other folks who ended up on the faculty of this department actually were quite prominently involved. They went out there, participated in the census and data collection. John McDonough, Steve Cesansky, David Jenkins, John Connolly, also engaged later on with the departments of neurology at Emory and also at Duke, and they helped us put together instruments saying, how do you capture stroke? How do you actually find out if somebody is exhibiting neurologic deficit, has had a stroke, may have had something like a TIA. First time TIAs were started to come up in the horizon. And that was because of a concern that folks in epidemiology expressed. What about if there is a deficit of coronary heart disease in African Americans? Is it competing with? Are we missing the strokes? Are we sort of selecting out susceptible because they have to have a stroke first? So that was brought in there. There are of course, the resident inhabitants of Evans and Willow counties, and several staff at UNC and at Evans County. So the first thing then to do was go forth, find out if you can do something like a census and come up with a plan for a study. A census was conducted. Those were the tools I do remember seeing ledgers of that kind. Believe it or not, those ledgers were equal to master copy. When you entered your data into the computer, this is a punch card. The discrepancies were resolved against the ledger, which I always found very fascinating, because this is a person out in literally some corner of Emmons County, Borough County, taking down names from the person saying, these are the people who live here, these are the folks who are members of this family. So a household enumeration was done. Interestingly enough, random subsamples were drawn, clever idea. So they cycled through the counties in 10 subsamples in order to avoid systematic bias, to avoid selective loss and things of that nature. And later on, they verified this against US Census. Amazing that they didn't miss anybody, basically. They missed 15 men, 16 women, or something like that, in this whole county. So it was remarkably good. In fact, they went to the Public Health Service and said, we have a plan, we have a population, we can pull this off. A cross-sectional survey followed, and it included instruments that measured health behavior, socioeconomic status, medical history questions, anthropometry, cholesterol, of course, and blood pressure. There may have been other things, but it was by today's standards, a little bit meager, but those were the risk factors people paid attention. Amazingly, 92% response rate for a study population of 32. Now, these statistics bring tear to the eyes of people who do population research today. 90% response rate. It was sufficient for the Public Health Service to say that we'll fund you. What were the results of the cross-sectional study? Overall, that shouldn't be capitalized. Manifestations of coronary heart disease were more common, more frequent, more prevalent in men than women, and in white men compared to black men. So they confirmed in the cross-sectional mode that discrepancy, the difference, the differential that clinical observation had motivated. Age-adjusted prevalence of CHD was 99 per thousand in the upper half of the social class score, that score being an adaptation for rural settings that included occupation, education, and source of income. So they contrasted, they pretty much divided by two strata of what they call social class, and found that the prevalence of coronary heart disease was 99 per thousand in the upper half, 44% per thousand in the lower half of white men. The distribution of this score, the Maguire-White Index of social status, is an adaptation of the Warner social status score, which somehow vanished from the slide, showed that there was a distribution, a dispersion for whites, and there very little, and almost very little overlap, and very little variability among African Americans. So contrasts between African Americans, white, and whites that would stratify on social status or take it into account were limited to a very narrow range of overlap. And that was one of the big challenges the investigators faced. Social status differences were so profound that there was very little overlap, and the limited range of opportunity to study this very interesting phenomenon that the prevalence of coronary heart disease among white men was driven to a large, significant degree by social status. What is behind that? Well, things like, if we look at non-farm employment, which could only be done basically for white residents, professional, by the way, shown here are white and African American respondents, office workers, very few, almost no African Americans, trades and service, again, and laborers, the majority.